Good morning. Welcome back to the Pastor Study. I don't really have an Ask the Pastor question today, so I'm going to give you one. We are experiencing something unprecedented in this storm Irma, the most powerful recorded storm in the Atlantic. Wind speeds in excess of 185 miles an hour. Now, right now, it has been downgraded to Category 4 storm, and those winds aren't as fast. It is still a huge, powerful system. And this is on top of what we saw just last week in Texas. Two huge storms. Maybe we should ask the question, is God saying something to us? Well, it's a legitimate question. The book of Judges interpreted natural disasters as a sign of God's judgment, as a sign that God was saying something to the people, that your behavior needs to be corrected, you need to repent, and you need to do something different. Now, that's a very hard thing to tell people. The reason you're getting a storm is because you've been disobedient to God, and people in other places weren't. It's hard to sound legitimate that way. Truth is, though, in the world, we see evil all the time. Sometimes it seems like a natural evil, like a storm. Sometimes we see it in interpersonal behaviors that people will exhibit, from murder to all sorts of terrible things that we do to each other. So how does a good God allow for evil in a system? A theological term for that is called theodicy. It's a question of how a good God allows for evil. And it's a real question. People get cancer, people get sick, people die, children are abused, people are raped. There's all sorts of terrible things that happen. You know this, I know this, they take place. And we ask that question, where is God in all this? What's happening that God would allow such terrible things to take place? But at the same time, I have never heard anybody complain about finding a $20 bill on the sidewalk. Like, oh no, what am I going to do with this extra money? Well, I've got this problem to deal with now that I have this good thing and something has to be done with it and it's terrible and I don't want it. We don't talk that way. We talk about it as a bonus, as a surprise, as a delight. Well, if good things happen, it's reasonable to assume that bad things happen too. Doesn't make it easy to understand how a good God would allow terrible things to happen, especially to good people. Terrible things happen to terrible people we don't get too upset about. It's still wrong, it's still an injustice, but we don't get as upset about it. But when bad things happen to good people, we don't like that at all. And we know this big Hurricane Irma has already destroyed the lives of people on several different islands in the Caribbean. And I'm sure some of those were good people who've had something terrible happen to them. They've lost their homes, they've lost their livelihood, they've lost family members. Some 18 people have already died. So how do we make sense of this? How do you and I, how do we deal with this? What do we do with this problem of evil? I mean, you can see that we as a people of faith have been trying to understand this from the very beginning. Even in the book of Genesis, the second chapter, and the third chapter, we are introduced to sin, disobedience, and its consequences. So you see, at a certain point, people of faith have been trying to understand, what do we do with this problem of evil, of sin, of the stuff that makes life, well, ugly? What do we do with it? Unfortunately, I don't have a really simple answer for you. But what I will tell you is that while the book of Judges may read a hurricane as God's judgment, Jesus said something slightly different. He talked about God sending rain on the just and the unjust. That's an interesting thing. Now, when we talk about that, it means that God gives good things to people who deserve them and to people who don't deserve them. And that's really consistent with how we understand Jesus, because the truth is, as we understand Jesus, we did not deserve salvation. We did not deserve God's love, but God has loved us in spite of ourselves, in spite of all the evil we've done, in spite of our sinful, selfish natures. God has loved us and has called us to be his children. We've been forgiven. This is not our doing. This is God's work of salvation. Well, why would God do that? The simple answer is because he loves us. And we seem to be okay with that. The place where we run into problem, though, is what about those bad things that happen? And they happen. It's happening now with this huge storm. Why would God let terrible things happen to people? Well, on one hand, God also lets good things happen to people. There seems to be, I don't want to say a balance, but at least a symmetry. Yes, bad things happen. It's true. Horrific things happen. We don't have to look far into history to see all sorts of things. In fact, you just turn on the evening news and we find all sorts of horrific things taking place around the world. Why would a good God allow this? At a certain point, we have to say we don't have a good answer. But with a storm like this one that's coming to Florida, we can also say it's an opportunity for those of us who have received the good rain, the blessings, to share with those who are having the problems right now. And that's a really important concept. It's very biblical. Paul, the apostle, as he was ministering to Gentile churches, took a collection for the poor in Jerusalem. And remember, early in the book of Acts, the church in Jerusalem was living communally. People would sell property as they had it, as there was need, and people were living together and sharing together because they were expecting Jesus to return very soon. By the time Paul is active in ministry, there are many people who are poor who've already sold their property, the money's been used, and now they're hungry. Now they need help. Well, Paul has collected an offering and is taking it back to Jerusalem. The idea is that those who had extra, those who had plenty, those who had enough could share with those who were in need. This is an important idea. We laugh with those who laugh, we rejoice with those who rejoice, and we weep with those who weep. We share in each other's burdens and in each other's joys and celebrations. We share in each other's prosperity and in each other's poverty. So here's a chance for us who are not being directly impacted by this storm. Oh, we're being affected by it. The gas prices have gone up. The price of plywood will go up and building materials in general. It's going to happen. But those of us who have can share with those who do not have. So how do we do that? Well, in the Church of the Brethren, we can give through disaster recovery ministries. It's not a problem, and it is not something that is quick and simple. We'll move on to the next story in the media here very soon. Shortly after the recovery starts, we're not going to hear much more about it. But for years, there will be recovery work that continues after the storm. It's going to need to be funded. Some of that the federal government will pick up. But some will be picked up by churches, just like ours, just like the Church of the Brethren, and disaster relief ministries is one of the ways we do that. We can talk about this in a few other ways as well. the Atlantic Northeast District is already collecting cleanup buckets. And you can see the list for that later, but the idea is that churches prepare and provide these cleanup buckets that are being collected at several places throughout the district, and then they'll be shipped to those who are doing cleanup work in Florida. It's a good way to be involved and to help. You do it as a family, do it as a Sunday school class. It doesn't really matter how we do it. We can do it as a whole church, and we can help just share a bit of the blessing we've received. Well, folks, I hope you have a great weekend. I look forward to seeing you on Sunday. Thanks for stopping by for this latest edition of Ask the Pastor. If you would, click like, leave a comment, or subscribe to the channel. Thanks. I hope you have a great weekend. We'll see you Sunday.